I think I just went went live without.
Are we live?
Yeah. We are live, but I'm gonna do the countdown. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this 71st episode of Blowback. What is the name of our
Something
program?
with Imperial decline.
We are exposing Imperial decline on a bi-weekly basis. No, bi-weekly is every 2 weeks, right? We're twice a week. So what is that?
Oh,
What is
Twice a week.
I guess
Twice a week.
On a
It's twice a
twice-weekly basis. We expose Imperial decline on a twice-weekly basis. We have our core panelists today, Ben Toth in Page-Hungry, Ian Cummer from a suburb in Moscow, and Carlo Parcelli in Washington, D.C. Our title this morning is Arsenals of Autocracy. So this is a slur against the axis of resistance that is, defeating Western imperialism. It's a slur coined by David Axe, an author at Forbes magazine, and he called the, what was it, like Iran, North Korea,
and China are Russia's arsenals of autocracy.
And China
that's the mental state of mind in the West. It's been a very rocky weekend for them because already they were big bad dictatorships, but now Iran has joined the group, and holy shit, they went nuts. They went nuts with their headlines and their content. That's David Axe, Forbes and the Telegraph UK. That's where this opinion piece comes from. Which, by the way,
yeah, go ahead.
Let me just add that the title actually rang pretty true, I have to say, because here is what the actual title said. Looking at today's wars as local issues is a huge mistake. It's one war and it is global, David Axe. He's not wrong, but then he immediately jumps to arsenals of autocracy.
Yeah, no, that is the correct way to perceive, what's going on. These are all connected, and it's all resulting from imperial decline and the empire, the Western Empire, trying to avoid and forestall that inevitable decline, collapse. But yeah, they're very angry at these countries for propping up Russia, allegedly. And I was going to say the Telegraph, they just have had a whole bunch of really, really hawkish, crazy articles and headlines. They're one of the most virulently warmongering kind of things. They're wanting Israel to respond. They're saying the U.S. has to get in there and start going to war with Iran. Like, they're just really pushing the super warmongering narrative.
Just so you know, within Britain, Telegraph, a pretty big website, is kind of Tory central. So like, it's that kind of it's like the John Boltons of the UK is what you get there. Let's bomb Tehran today. Those guys.
The Guardian is kind of the left Labor kind of outlet, and then the Telegraph is like the right wing conservative.
Yeah.
And you got the Sun, and you have
that's
on
the
the right,
tabloids.
the Daily Mail on this right.
Those are like the National Enquirer. Or the New York Post.
At this point, I think they've all kind of sunk to the Enquirer. I mean, not all of them. The Guardian was at one point a respectable, somewhat news source. Now it's just
when I was a kid, maybe. Yeah, but yeah, the Telegraph is the Newsweek in Britain. It's like Neocon Central in the English context. Yeah, just amazing stuff. But what rattled them? Shall we get into that story, or do you perhaps? I don't know. Do you prefer to get into Operation Truthful Promise?
Yeah,
sure.
Let's juxtapose Operation Truthful Promise with Operation Prosperity Guardian. So Operation Prosperity Guardian started in December. Lloyd Austin declared the intent to end Yemen's embargo of Israel and to make sure that the Red Sea was safe for cargo ships going to Israel, resupplying Israel. Today is April 16th. and I haven't heard a thing about Operation Prosperity Guardian since like February. And
except for some ships running out of missiles and being called back home. There was a French frigate this weekend, but that's it. That's all you hear. Yep.
Well, I think the Houthis are the ones who are representing the rules-based world order and deterring, destabilizing unprovoked aggression in the Middle East by deterring sanctions against Israeli regime. So.
Yeah, true. and on a principled basis, actually stepping up against a genocide. But now the mothership, not just the little, as the West call it, proxies, but, allies of Iran, but the mothership has flown in, not just the little chicks. That's what's happened pretty much Sunday morning. So, yeah, by Sunday morning, every website had a live tab. And it was every diplomatic phone in every capital in the world was just ringing. Everybody was talking with each other, meetings everywhere. They went like headless chicken mode. That was.
Ian, what is your take? I would like to hear your thoughts. I mean, the media is spinning this Operation Truthful Promise as an epic failure. As not only an epic failure, but an absurd overreaction. And war crime in and of itself, despite it being an epic failure. So, I mean, the media is spinning it how we totally expect. But I've seen Scott Ritter's analysis, and it's quite a bit different. What is your take on how that went?
Well, I saw a surprisingly sane CNN analysis. I was a little surprised. I mean, it was a little wonky, but it was for CNN. It was surprisingly restrained, saying that it was likely that Iran's intent with their response was to keep casualties low because they had this long lead up to their strike, and it was all from Iran. They did not try launching anything from close because obviously the closer a missile or a drone launches to its target, the harder it is to intercept. So by launching everything from Iran, that gives several hours.
It's almost 1,000 kilometers.
Yeah, so it's. So I think it was a big show. I think that's actually the most correct statement. It was a big show of force. So it would show that because Iran saves face because they couldn't let the embassy bombing slide, and they did take that step of saying, hey, if the UN condemns the aggression, that's enough for us. But Israel would not do that. So Iran responded, and I think they were completely legal in responding. It was a very restrained response. And at the same time, it lets Israel save face because it didn't apparently cut. It wasn't, you can debate because, of course, Israel claimed they shot down almost everything.
99%. It was everywhere. Yeah.
They can. I think regardless, I think we can say with some degree of safety say it was fairly light damage that the strike caused. So Israel can save face, but can choose to not respond further without losing face. However, Israel does not have that mindset. They feel like they're like that kid in class or that guy you're arguing with on Facebook who has to get the last word in. If you respond, doesn't even matter what you respond with, he has to respond to get the last word in. And that's kind of puts Biden and the USA in a bad position because the more Israel, because Iran did make it very clear that if Israel strikes back, they will strike back immediately. They won't even wait. They'll just strike back immediately. And I think that's likely, too, because that embassy attack may have caught Iran by surprise. I mean, I'm sure it did. They didn't expect just a strike like that. So it probably took a lot of time for them to think about how they were going to respond. But if there's a second strike, they might just respond immediately to it. And that puts the USA in a bad position because it can boil over into a regional conflict the more back and forth there is. And I said this a few months ago, and I think it's absolutely true. The Middle East is more likely to sink Biden in the election than Ukraine is. It's a more heartfelt issue for Democratic voters, what's happening in Palestine. And of course, if Iran and Israel blow up at each other, it's going to affect the gas pump. It's going to affect people's daily lives more than Ukraine is. So, and unfortunately, Biden's just too weak. They're just too weak to do anything about it. I mean, they could threaten Israel. They could just say, hey, you know what? We're supporting you 100%. That can all go away tomorrow if you keep rocking the boat. But they can't or won't do that. So Israel's kind of calling the shots on whether or not they escalate with Iran. And that's just a huge problem.
Yeah, playing hardball with Israel would also be a political liability for the Democrats, because the Republicans would then accuse the Democrats of not supporting Israel, and that would be, it would be a political liability for them. Depending, it's from the donors, it would be a political liability. From the voters, maybe not. But who are more important, the donors or the voters? Well, we know the answer to that.
Here's what's bothering me about the different messaging. Publicly, I think last show's title was ironclad support. Whatever happens, we will always support. And that's the big statements from the high honchos. And privately, take the win, slow things down. We're not going to support a retaliation against Iran, but it's always private. They never just put Biden up there and say, if you do anything, you're cut off, kid. You can't get anything. These are Talmudic psychos, and that's where everybody sits still. This is not over. Everybody's sitting on edge. What will happen? But based on what's been, can I just do a very quick, a data rundown of how we got there? So April 1, that's the April Fool's Day. That's the embassy attack. It's the middle of Ramadan, the peaceful, it's from March 10 till April 10, the fasting, right? Eid, which is the breaking of the fast. That was April 10. On the 11th, Iran apparently warns 72 hours before the attack, all the regional countries, including the US, through intermediaries in Switzerland, that this attack is coming. This is what's going to happen. They all had time to prepare. They sent this 300 plus, okay, including with allies, cheap Shahid drones, some cruise missiles, and some ballistic missiles, okay? And here's what happened. Everybody had to self-proclaim, including the US, that carriers were already moved there. We shot down 80 of these things. France did the same. So that's the US and France. Britain sent its RAF fighters from Cyprus. Okay. Jordan, I don't know why, but they self-did this, saying we helped too. Saudi Arabia first on the Saudi family's website saying we assisted too. Now they're trying to step back that shit. But that was everybody taking part in this and apparently shooting down 99%. While it's confirmed, pretty much you can see the videos where 5 or 4 really fast strikes. By the way, this is the Kyber drones, not hypersonics. This is Mach 5. That's a supersonic in ICBM, a ballistic missile. Okay, and they hit the two very important, according to Scott Ritter, the most protected military installations in the Negev desert. Okay, so the one is something like Robin. I'm just going to find it because this is where I begin to cheat. Yeah, Ramon and the Nevatim air bases. Nevatim is where they sent the fighters from to smash the embassy. Okay, 14 days earlier, because this is the 14th. The Western media says this is an unprovoked attack, this against international law. Now they have hegemonic worldwide ambitions. It's terrible, and everything began on this day. Very, very weird. But it took all of this, including all the Patriot systems, because they have that, the Iron Dome, Arrow 2 and 3, David Sling, the airborne interceptors from the US and France, and just the check for that evening, according to an Israeli general, was between 1.1 and 1.3 billion dollars. What happens when, and Iran said, if you do anything, the slightest things, our response will be in seconds and it will be tenfold, and they can do that. All of that. This is what I think, Ian. You probably agree with this. This is what the saturation of an air defense means, right? Just overwhelming. And I love that Gilad Erdan or the UN guy, Israel's UN guy, had this little tablet saying, look, they're flying over the Al-Aqsa Mosque. We are protecting it. Fuck you. They didn't target a single synagogue. They didn't target schools, hospitals, nothing. That's why the Israelis were at the beach. 2 military installations, apparently a third that I can't confirm, some sort of info center. Nobody died. They brought up this 7-year-old girl who got hurt somewhere, which I thought was a disgusting Israeli story, but that's it. And there were allegations that in Jordan, because they shot down some debris, people got hurt, but that's it. That's what Iran did. It's purely military, and it's just so insane no, it's not insane. I think it's a huge win to say, look, this coalition And your defense was so good. You sent a huge message. It's a win. It's a win. Iran can say it's a win. By the way, immediately their statements were, we consider this done. There is no reason for any follow-up. This is according to international law. We have done the retaliation. It's over. It's a perfect point to just get off the train, stop war. That's it.
I have 4 things in mind.
Okay.
I can only remember 3, but I just want to expand on what Ben just said. The estimate is 1.3 billion for air defense, but on the Iranian side, it's far less. So there is a tactical victory in that. I wanted to say it's interesting to me that the Western media, if there's not a bunch of deaths and destruction, then it's a failure. If you have to kill people, kill children, kill women before it's a success. That's the Western press. I want to say one more thing about the Western press. That is, they suffer from what Theodore Adorno called ahistorical historicism, and that is that the last thing that happened. That's the only ahistorical rationalism. That's the last thing that happened is
Came
the
out
only
of the blue.
thing that happened, and you derive all of your context, all of your rational statements from that last event. So it does sound rational, but without history behind it, without the true context of going back in time, it's crazy. What they're saying is lunacy, and that really defines the media now, because I was watching CNN and the whole thing was about the Iranian counterattack and what a huge failure it was. And that's proof positive that there's a kind of ahistorical rationalism going on that would make sense from their point of view, but certainly not in the context of history. I used to feel that would be one of the great failures of the West. That would be one of the things that brought it down. That it purposefully ignored that approach to history, and then I went in through a phase and said nothing's going to bring them down. I'm going back to my old sense that has a great deal of power, a great deal of efficacy in the current demise of what we're seeing in the West. It's stupid on their part, really, almost infantile.
Was that all 3 things, or
No, I forgot the 4th one.
Okay.
Or 3.
I'm with you, but you also mustn't forget how hypocritical this entire. Do you want to see 26 seconds with the obligatory, director's musical ending of pure hypocrisy? Just it's not going to be sped up. I'm no longer speeding up videos. Check this out. An interview that was, I think, today.
For Iran to have done, and I think the whole world can see all these countries that have somehow wondered, well, what is the true nature of Iran? It's there in black and white.
What would Britain do if a hostile nation flattened one of our consulates?
Well, we would take the very strong action.
I like the shorter cut because then he gets into trying to explain his hypocrisy and he just bumbles. But yeah,
it's a couple days old. I think that was from 2 days ago. But the total hypocrisy. And he weasels out of it, of course. But obviously, from my perspective, Iran had, of course, every right to respond, and I think their response was appropriate, and it checked all the boxes that Iran wanted to check. So they demonstrated that they know how to penetrate, Israel's defenses, which they did by hitting, these air bases. They, used a lot fewer resources, like we discussed. It was like over $1 billion for the West, and there was like less than 100 million of equipment, missiles and things like that. It was not too provocative. It hit military targets. They gave plenty of time. They gave plenty of warning. So they allowed the West to set up their defenses, to bring all their assets in, to shoot down everything, and they still couldn't shoot down everything. And they say 99%, but again, the whole strategy was, you're going to shoot down these things, and we're going to saturate, your defenses. And then what we want to get through is going to get through. So this is what kind of Scott Ritter's point was, how effective Iran's response was. And of course, the media just does a disservice and it spins it like they always do about everything. But I think it was very, very well organized, very well, conducted by Iran. And now the ball is in Israel's court, and they have some very tough decisions. And I think they're going to stand down, because I think the U.S. is getting very stern with them about, we are not going to have a regional war against Iran. We are not going to fight Iran on your behalf. So just know this, and you need to act accordingly. You're not going to suck us in. This war party, the neocons, the John Boltons, don't have control right now. And the party that wants to go to war with China, they're the ones in control. China's our war, not Iran. Deal with it. And so
I just wish I could be sure they'll follow that order, I can't.
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, there were 2 war meetings, and the first didn't reach a conclusion, and the latest was, I think today, was we are going to strike back, but we're not going to provoke a war. We're not going to do a loss of life, but we have to strike back because, we'll see what the fuck happens. But that's their latest.
Well,
mystical.
2 more points. Billy Bob reminded me of the other point.
Okay.
And that is, I don't think we should rule out the fact that the Biden administration and the U.S. intelligence community, as well as the British, are in on everything that Israel is doing, that they have a hand in it. They had a hand in the attack on the embassy in Syria, the Iranian embassy in Syria. They knew about it in advance, and they gave it a rubber stamp. My second point is,
so that's your opinion, or do we have evidence?
That's my opinion.
Okay.
Based on the evidence of history, ignoring the
it
way
seems
the
like an open question, and it wouldn't surprise me either way. It wouldn't surprise me, but I haven't really seen evidence. But it wouldn't surprise me if Israel just went rogue and did that.
The statements were, I think, from the White House, Corinne Jean-Pierre, or the Pentagon, the Singh woman, was that we were disappointed. We got such short notice. That's the official line. I don't know if it's true any more than you do.
Yeah, I'm so cynical about U.S. foreign policy that I think they're behind all of this, and that they're lying in publicly. They're lying. So we go off on these tangents about Netanyahu and Biden are feuding and all that crap, and I think it's just bullshit. Now I've lost my other point. I'll probably get back to it. Oh yes, that's what I wanted to say. Also, this was a great intelligence coup for Iran, because they got to see that Iron Dome in action.
That's true.
And they learned a whole lot from that.
Sure.
What are the capabilities? Yes, a huge intelligence gathering operation as well.
We should wonder how many anti-air missiles Israel is stocking up now, because there's been all those Ukrainian complaints about Patriot missiles running out, and you have to wonder. Well, I mean, we're still sending them aid. The U.S. military aid never stopped, even with that bill stalled in Congress. It never stopped. So it's like, why is there? I mean, assuming it's true, and the Ukrainians aren't just bullshitting, it's just possible. But I think there does have to be some explanation for why Russian air is just having a field day, and there's almost no response to it. I mean, we have to consider the possibility that because this situation in the Middle East has been boiling over since October, they're just rerouted all of that to Israel because they know that Iron Dome could potentially be coming under a lot of pressure.
Can you imagine? I'm almost sympathetic, but can you imagine what it feels like to be either a Zelensky or Kuleba and watching this?
Well, I mean, the moment within 24 hours of Israel getting into trouble, they sent 2 aircraft carriers to help them. I mean, that really shows how low in the rules-based world order pecking order, the food chain, the Ukraine is, and Israel's right there at the top with the big boys. They sit at the table. I mean, it's like Antony Blinken is the one who said it. if you're not sitting at the table, you're on the menu. Israel is sitting at the table and Ukraine is on the menu. That's, in Blinken's own words, is basically the relationship. So yeah, I'm sure Ukrainians are upset. I mean, they should have
Welcome to
seen
reality.
it from the
By the way,
beginning,
just
but, yeah.
recently, it could be yesterday, it could be today, the Wall Street Journal had this exclusive with Odessa University academic, someone, I don't care to say his name, that apparently this has caused real uproar, and the actual quote is envy and ire among the Ukrainian population that he's in contact with, because they saw
What
this.
are we, chopped liver? Come on
Yeah.
with the Patriots.
And this one time, I mean, even the band rights, I don't blame them. I mean, you have to understand your place in these things, and it hurts. It really does. And Zelensky said the same. We need the same kind of unity, the same kind of Iron Dome. Why don't we get this? Israel's not in. He made this interview for PBS. I don't know where. Like, Israel's not in NATO. How come they get all this shit and we don't? And yeah, I kind of get where he's coming from, but too bad, mate.
There was a particular quote that you shared about Kuleba,
That's,
you know, and it was like essentially he was mentioning, you know, if the U.S. is going to tell us, you know, how to fight this war, we're going to listen if while they're telling us, they're giving us Patriots, F-35s, whatever. But if they're just telling us without giving us anything, we're not going to listen.
Yeah,
And,
that's basically it.
That's the straight up blackmail quote. I mean, that's a paraphrase, but that's essentially what he was saying. I do want to thank everybody for viewing. I don't think I've done that yet. We have a few comments. So this was a comment about the title of our program. So they do come up with good pejoratives, but they're not able to produce any artillery yet. Tackley is giving his Palestine support with the watermelons. Iran and Yemen, I believe, there. And then Lilia wants me to tee off on the fake neo-Marxist psyop, and you know, maybe we will get to that later. And then Polly, of course, is joining us. She's regular. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please, post comments. We appreciate them. But we were going to discuss. What were we going to discuss? We were gonna segue to Ukraine just being angry at how Israel is treated and feeling like a second-class vassal.
But isn't what we just discussed confirmation that the United States is behind all of these aggressions and calling the shots? Because Ukraine just said, look, if you're not going to give us weapons, we're not going to listen to you, whereas Israel's getting weapons. So they're listening to the United States. That would be the logic for me. Why would Israel suddenly be the exception? This notion of the rogue state. I don't buy it. I think the U.S. is behind all this. All of this.
Let's go there. Let's address that. So I'm presenting a certain conceptual framework of how to understand these events, and then Carlo is a little bit different. So I'm saying there's multiple factions within the ruling class establishment, and they have oppositional interests as well as overlapping interests. And there's a war party. There's a faction within this ruling class that wants war with Iran. They've wanted war with Iran for 20, 30, 40 years maybe. And they haven't gotten it, but they've been pushing for it. We've seen them for the past several decades in the media demanding war with Iran, trying to argue that war with Iran is what is necessary. They have think tanks drawing out, proposals on how we can have war with Iran. And we have billionaires funding these things. And these people represent factions within the ruling class establishment. And also, obviously, they're very tight with Israel, and they want to protect Israel. So I think, in my mind, I think of Haim Saban. So Haim Saban is a media mogul billionaire who is stated explicitly, I am politically active. I donate a lot of money to political parties, and I'm a one-issue guy, and that issue is Israel. So he's all about subordinating every other consideration of what is in the national interest of this country to Israel's national interest. And so he's doing a lot of funding of think tanks. He's buying politicians. He's promoting people on media channels. But you have a consensus within the establishment that says that's crazy talk. We're the United States, Israel's a fucking vassal. We're not going to sacrifice the interests of the United States on behalf of Israel. Of course, we're going to maintain a tight relationship. We're going to keep using Israel as our proxy in the Middle East. They're a benefit to us, but we're not going to subordinate our interests to protecting and defending them or going to war with them when we have an agenda. We have our own agenda. Our own agenda involves a pivot to Asia and not, this new regional war in Iran just for Israel's benefit. That's not what we're about. So there's this struggle, which I see taking place. And so this attack against, in Syria, the attack against the what is that called? The embassy, like the consulate. Like I can see how Israel's doing that, trying to stimulate, trying to get pressure and leverage against this consensus to change the consensus, to get the consensus to empower the hawks that want war with Iran and to change the establishment consensus into just attacking Iran and, maybe putting China off for a couple more years. What do you think about that, Carlo? I mean, is that a rational?
Well, that was something you covered in that great article you have in the Greenville Post.
Oh,
yeah. So I essentially disagree with that. I think that the U.S. wants to pry Iran away from the bricks and road initiatives, China and Russia. I think it's and I think they're willing to go right to the brink of war with Iran. But if it comes down to a war with Iran, I think they're counting on Russia and China not participating, not coming to Iran's aid. And the other thing is that Iran has made great strides in the last couple of decades in technology, and productivity and all along the lines. The U.S. Efforts to sabotage that through the MEC and these other groups has basically failed. So, but I think they want to cripple Iran, and they see all of this stuff as crippling, as elements of the crippling of Iran, destroying its credibility as a new power in the world, that sort of thing. It's when you think about it, you have to rule out North Korea in this statement. But of the 4 countries that form the title of this show, Iran is 3rd in power. And it's failed, and the West has failed with Ukraine. Ukraine's whole purpose was to get Putin out of power and to break up Russia. That as insane as that sounds, as ahistorically stupid as that sounds, that was the plan. Now you got to consider what's the term that you could most apply to U.S. foreign policy, and that's stupid. They have not won a war, as we pointed out in the last article, the last show, since Grenada. And Grenada, if you remember, they were held off for 3 days by 35 Cuban engineers. They weren't even regular army. They weren't even regular fighting force in Cuba. They were engineers helping to build, projects for the Manley government, which was seen as communist. And it's a tiny little country. They failed in Afghanistan. They failed in Vietnam. They failed in Iraq. They failed in Syria. The list is, you might say NATO succeeded in Libya because their intention was to render that country useless. But it's hardly what would be called a victory in any real sense of the word. So
people in Grenada gave Clint Eastwood all he could handle.
That's right.
In that movie.
I mean, if you might both be right and you might both be slightly wrong, but the 2 base assumptions that Carlo made was separate Iran from Russia and China. You might be right, but then you said they're stupid. That's true, because what has this whole thing done? They're going to sanction it even more. They're going to bring it even closer to Russia and China. As for destroying it, I don't. This is the one point where I don't think you're right. I mean, a couple of things to consider. Yemen absolutely blocked the Red Sea. And one day before Operation Truthful Promise, they grabbed the ship off the Strait of Hormuz, demonstrating we can do other stuff too. We can stop the fucking oil without even destroying the region. We can stop the oil that you guys live on. So in America, there's also an election. There's also oil prices already going up just based on this. And a lot of sane capitalist people, it's just me, self-gain, more, saying this could fucking destroy everything that I've ever built if there's an actual big war with Iran. Remember, this is it's 75 times the size of Israel. It's mountainous. I mean, could you imagine what's in those mountains if the Houthis could get away with what they got away with over the Red Sea? And that's why I think the diplomatic stuff is, come on, please take the win. Please slow down. Don't do more. We're really getting nervous on this. Is my feeling that even, of course, within every, there's difference between this wing and that wing of the bourgeoisie in America, but there's the stronger, there's John Boltons everywhere, lunatics. But I think right now the stronger part of them is the saner one. I hope so. But yeah.
Well,
At this point,
a domestic politics point of view, I would support that. But that simply means that after Biden is reelected, if he is reelected, then you'll probably see all hell break loose.
Yeah, that very well could be. That's a safe bet.
Ian?
Yeah, I don't think the USA wants a war with Iran. I think it's obvious at this point it wouldn't be winnable. I mean, Iran might. I mean, I don't think Iran would win a regional conflict with US-backed forces, but I don't think our side would win either. And I just think it's all evidence suggests it's true. The USA does not want a war with Iran, but Israel, Netanyahu's government in particular, is just desperate. And it's very common for desperate people to get more aggressive as they get more desperate. And, it's the same strategy Ukraine is trying. What do you do if you want to
attack a nuclear power plant?
Yeah, if you're the appendage, you want to get the central brain directly involved. I think there's a lot of motivation to do that. And that's what Israel's trying to do. And the USA is trying to not get sucked into it, but it's impotent. We're very impotent. I mean, not just Biden, who's impotent. He's a vegetable as far as I can tell. Lloyd Austin is impotent. Antony Blinken is impotent. They're all extremely impotent. And it's nepotism, and just that they're in these positions and they have no idea how to navigate this crisis. And they're just getting dragged along by the ear. I think that's what we're seeing.
I think incompetence is definitely a defining feature of the people in charge of the Western Empire and the collapsing Western Empire. They are incompetent. But on the other hand, even if they were super, super, super competent, there's nothing they can do to really save themselves because they don't have the cards to play. Like the landscape is too, the reality is that it's not there's no options for them, even no matter how competent they are. But so
I'm gonna just state it out loud that they would lose. I think, Ian. Small disagreement.
Well, it depends on how do you define. I mean, they could definitely kill a lot of Iranians. They could set back the economy. They can create chaos on the global economy.
Outlasting, just based on what we discussed about the missile prices and the cheap drone prices, it's who does more damage, who can outlast the other one. I really think they got rattled. All of the US press, not the British because they're mad. The US press was about, hold on, come on, take the win. It's okay, fine, just slow down, boy. All of it, without exception, Yeah,
but we've already determined the press is not particularly, on the ball.
Yeah, but they do follow directions. We're talking Washington Post, the CIA.
When I was coming up, the Washington Post. Oh my God, on Vietnam, they were wrong every day for years. They were wrong into the 1970s.
I'm not saying they're factual. I'm saying they're following instructions because they're partly owned by the CIA. Jeff Bezos is little group. So they do reflect
the church committee.
Like if you think about the vibe, the opinion pieces, they do reflect the mood. That's all I'm saying.
But what I wanted to say was, if there was some kind of open conflict in that region, Israel would certainly be reined in as far as the U.S. was concerned, because they'd suffer more damage, obviously, than the U.S. Not, the U.S. isn't on its sovereign soil isn't going to be touched, but Israel is going to be touched, and that's a way of getting back to some kind of control over what they feel might be out of control. And they have no compunction of doing that. No compunction of doing that. Believe me, I don't care how strong APAC is or anything. The U.S. will do anything it takes to control things. And if there is this kind of rogue aura around Israel, that the U.S. doesn't like, they've got plans to take care of it, and that can be part of the plan. I mean, they don't care.
Yeah, I
Israel's
think
got, 10 million people. They don't care if all 10 million die, really, to tell you the truth. They don't give a
True.
rat's rectum. They don't.
But they
You've
do
got to
care about their
understand
bottom
the West
lines, was my point.
that perspective.
they're not happy with Netanyahu, so they'd like to do a regime change, get in a government that's more compliant, less roguish. And I think they have an understanding. I think the United States has an understanding with Iran. I think they've let Iran know that we're not interested in a regional war. We don't want to go to war with you. And Iran says the same thing. So I think the U.S. and Iran have this understanding, and it's Israel that needs to be maintained. And that's something they manage through PR. They're managing that through, through statements and pretending, hey, it's ironclad. We got your back. We're going to defend you. But at the same time, they're telling them, don't do anything stupid, because we know what you want. You want us to attack Iran, and we're not going to do that. I think that's going forward. That's what's going to play out. No matter what Israel does, and who knows what they're going to do, they might, launch a big attack, or they might behave themselves and not, make a big effort to draw the U.S. in, because the U.S. has told them we're not gonna fall for that. That's what I think. But we'll watch it play out these next couple weeks. I mean, and we'll see what Israel does. The ball's in Israel's court. There's been a lot of talk from the Israelis about what they're going to do, but we'll see what they actually do. Yes, Ben.
Let me tell you a little bit about the aftermath, at least in diplomacy. Even though we can all say the UN is dysfunctional, pretty much dominated by the US, sometimes it's important, to get support from other countries, popular opinion, all that. And despite the speech we might look at from Mr. Gilad Erdogan, which is completely unhinged, they didn't manage to get a condemnation through, largely thanks to Russia, China. I mean, a lot of countries it's the usual, the G7 basically, and Japan and Australia. They said they condemned this horrible thing. Nobody else did. And that even includes the Philippines, Malaysia, places like that. They said this was self-defense. They couldn't get a statement from the United Nations Security Council. So they're completely isolated again. And they went back to Russia and China to the 2nd of April, when they tried to convene a meeting to condemn Israel for striking the embassy. And France, the UK, and the US stopped them. And that has come back to bite them, because those same countries, let's just look at what this has been sold all my life and before it, as look at the big wrongdoers in the world, and we are innocent. And what has changed is this shit we are about to watch, just 50 seconds, no longer works.
Iran's strategy has been crystal clear: arm, fund, and train terror proxies across the globe to carry out Iran's murderous scheme of domination. But today, the mask of Iranian deniability has been removed. No more hiding and no more bluffing. No more shirking of responsibility. Iran has attacked Israel from its own sovereign territory, publicly and proudly. The mask is off. Iran, the #1 global sponsor of terror, has exposed its true face as the destabilizer of the region and the world. And now, right now, is when the world must stop ignoring Iran's crimes and take action. The mask comes off, and the gloves must come on.
That was him, and it didn't work. They couldn't he wanted everybody to sanction Iran, everybody to condemn, to basically the IRGC to be declared as terrorists, and he got none of that. That's a change, I think, a huge one. That again,
ahistorical rationalism.
Yeah.
The vanity of the guy he had like one half of a sentence on each page because he didn't want to wear his glasses. But I mean, that's a minor point, but it was idiotic.
I did notice that he had very few words per page, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was flipping every sentence. He was flipping.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but
So-
I think he and the US took it for granted that whatever we say, whatever childish fucking fairy tale we say, it's going to be the law. And sorry, it's just not happening. Not anymore.
Well, and there's the time frame. I mean, what was it? When did Israel attack the embassy in Syria? 9-10 days before? That
2
wasn't
weeks,
enough.
14 days.
14 days. That wasn't quite enough time for people to forget that. You know what I mean? Stupid.
Yeah.
Just stupid.
Yeah, the whole idea that that's when history starts. That's when our narrative starts.
Yeah.
Iran just attacked us. Nothing happened before that. That's
Yeah, it's crazy.
Let's see what came out of the blue so far. It was the 24th of February 2022, Russia's SMO. It was 10/7/2024, right? Hamas attacks Israel, and now the 14th of April 2024. They all came out of the blue. Nothing before that. And
Now, Orwell was a snitch and a deplorable human being, but
Dirty,
he
rotten.
did have some decent criticisms of how, you know, the media propaganda apparatus works. And he talked a lot about, we're just, ahistorical rationalism. I mean, he talked about that. He didn't use those terms, but, we're going to forget everything that happened in the past. And the Ministry of Truth is going to tell us exactly what to believe, and we're just going to ignore, what they told us to believe yesterday. It's pretty cynical, but it still works. It still works to a declining degree. I think more and more people are waking up, and I'm optimistic, Carlo.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's
Do you
fine.
know what
Maybe reading the comments on the AOL about the people blocking the bridges, in Golden State, kind of put me in a more cynical mood.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's local public opinion to talk about. I saw that video. Apparently, there was many of those in America, like pro-Palestine protests.
Pro-Palestinian, but the comments from the general public were, throw the protesters into the bay, run them over with trucks.
Terrorists.
Where the cops? I remember the good old days when the cops would take the what end of I said the lethal end of their batons and wade into the crowd. Now would take the protesters. Now would take care of it. Kill the protesters, send them to Gaza. The whole 100, and it was. I must have read 200 of those. And there was only two comments in support of the protesters. So that's your working class. That's your working class in America, guys.
No, those are
That's
AOL
cut out for
commenters. Those
I'm
are
sorry,
AOL
what?
commenters. I don't think that's the same as the majority of the population. But you're right. Insofar as there's, I mean, American society, as I've recently seen, Australian society is on the edge. People are on the edge, and it's beginning to bubble up. You've seen these two knifings within 2 days in Australia. It's a society on edge. So with Western Europe, and I don't think that's been taken into account by our elites, not even to the least. I mean, Biden can't appear anywhere without someone shouting "Free Palestine."
Yeah,
I'm sure they've done internal polling to determine the country's opinion on Israel-Palestine and how much support Palestinians really have. I haven't seen too many published studies, but I'm sure they're doing them, and they're probably not happy with the results. But I would imagine, I mean, more than half the country, I would suggest, if just given a simple question, do you support Palestine or Israel? Most people would say Palestine. I would guess it would be more than 50%, but that's
until they're inconvenienced. Until they're inconvenienced by a protest,
I mean, I just like the fact that
how shallow they are.
After this UN Security Council meeting failed, the next place the US went was the G7, where everybody's basically, a pawn of the US, little muppets of them, where they tried to get what is their next step? Let's sanction Iran more, which I don't think it's like sanctioning the Houthi. What the fuck is that going to achieve? And that's their go-to weapon now. And it's just completely backfiring on the economy and, on everything. It's just so impotent what they're doing. And look at everybody's approval numbers, including, the G7. Macron, Paris has rats. Apparently, number 10 Downing in London has fleas for some reason. These people and Macron, where these people are still in revolt, he's going to ask for Chinese help to get a ceasefire in the Middle East and in Ukraine during the Olympics. Okay, and the other one was from Financial Times, which I think is the new fucking masterclass in Western democracy. I'm going to read you the original headline: Washington calls on the EU to use its influence in Beijing to halt weapon transfers to Moscow. Okay, that's how much they just can't achieve anything they want. They're asking for help from 2 intermediaries. Please, can someone please help us? They're just so running out of runway at this point.
Well, the absurdity of it kind of illustrated with the cozying up between Russia and North Korea. USA went to Russia and said, you are violating the sanctions against North Korea. And the US also sent people to North Korea to say, you are violating sanctions against Russia. So it's like, that's the point of absurdity, where the list of people who are sanctioned are so long. We're approaching people on the list and telling each of them to stop trading with each other because we sanctioned both of you.
And you might have missed this. What did Russia and China do at the UN level? They stopped not the sanctions, the UN sanctions, but the monitoring of those sanctions. There was this monitoring agency who looked at...
I missed that story.
Yes. Yeah, they just stopped that. It's gone. Sorry, you're basically free to trade. You're free of the sanctions, North Korea. That's the end result, which I think is amazing.
Speaking of absurdities, one of my favorite absurdities over the last few days was, France trying to get a ceasefire going in Ukraine for their Olympics. So number one, they've banned Russia from participating in the Olympics. So Russia is not going to participate in the Olympics. Yet they want to ask Russia to do a ceasefire during the Olympics. Is that absurd? Like, that's
wait. Number 3, this is unconfirmed, but Russian Telegram and some semi-official Russian news says there's a lot of French dying in Slavyansk. So they're also sending their soldiers to kill Russians at the same time as doing this shit. Maybe Ian knows better about Slavyansk.
Well, I probably saw the same Telegram post. I would call that very unconfirmed.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's impossible, but rumor. Yes.
And it was mercenaries. It was French mercenaries. I mean, allegedly.
French Foreign Legion, allegedly. Yes.
Okay. Well, the Foreign Legion, yeah, I didn't know it was actually the French Foreign Legion because they actually have ties to this.
Vague. Yeah, they do, and so it's very vague, and there's no way to, for sure.
I usually kind of understood France, but Macron is born with a silver spoon with a Napoleon complex. What this guy has done over the last couple of years is just incredible to me. I can't put a rational spin on it. It's just irrational to me. But.
So more absurdities. Italy, of course, dropped out very publicly of the Belt and Road Initiative, and now they're going back to China, saying, you know what, we actually really do need your economic support because our economy is going to tank. So they've gone back hat in hand to try and negotiate some kind of trade deals with China. Same with Schultz, right? Schultz is currently in China. There he is.
You don't need comments on that picture. Isn't it just beautiful? That's the General Secretary versus the Bundeskanzler of German.
So everybody's angry. Nobody wanted Schultz to go to China. And Schultz took some business people, and the entirety of the West is trying to influence him and was against him going there because he's going there to develop ties to help shore up Germany's economy. Germany's economy that, Schultz's policies have obviously destroyed. And so he's thinking about himself and to a lesser extent, the German people. And he's like, we're going to need to do something because if the U.S. has their way, we're just going to be sacrificed. Our whole economy is going to be sacrificed. So we got to do something for ourselves. So he's over there. Everybody's mad at him.
Yeah, it took him more than 2 years. Now they say he's undermining Brussels. He wants the embrace of the dragon. I mean, these were the actual headlines.
Well, and here's the thing too, because I see this in the European sphere all the time. When European and the EU bloc get, not so much the UK, but the EU bloc definitely, when they get angry at Americans and they say, well, you know what? We'll just go to China. We'll just go to China. And it just kind of shows how two-faced they are. I mean, they're won over by the value of the dollar, but they have no integrity, they have no honor. But the thing is, they do so they go over to the other side. They go over to China, to the USA's adversary, China. Olaf the snowman goes to China and just gets turned into a mockery. I think that everybody at this point knows these guys are two-faced and don't even take them seriously when they play this game of trying to play both sides. There's just not even.
So Volkswagen is going to open up a shop, right? Invest 2.8 billion or something in China in the domestic car market there. So he's probably going to be able to land some deals, and that's going to be good for Germany, and of course it's good for China. It's the U.S. that is not going to be happy about that. But I mean, it's just a little bit. You'd think if he was seriously interested in the welfare of his people, he wouldn't have, allowed them to destroy the pipeline.
It's outsourcing. It's outsourcing of German industry, so it's good for China, but it's not really good for Germany. It's because Germany sacrificed their cheap energy, which everybody told them was going to happen if you become uncompetitive in energy prices.
That's the thing. That if you look at European news, what you get is competitiveness is the buzzword of the last 2 weeks, like loss of competitiveness. That's you're not getting that back unless, and that's a tall order for China. By the way, Scholz was met by like the deputy mayor of the city where he landed, a tier 2 city. That's it. No red carpet, no marching bands, nothing. And then apparently, and I just read the transcript today and I can't quote it, but there was 4 points made to him by Xi, basically dress down and learn, you little fuck. This is how you work in the world economy. This is what you do. And apparently he didn't like that one bit. But what China needs to do is a way tall order is to get Germany and the Western Europe to actually think independently of the US and make good with their natural ally, which is Russia. Again, tall order, because Boris fucking Pistorius, the German defense minister, on the same day, he presented some book at a Churchill's, whatever, a Churchill book somewhere in Berlin who like, he can't resist this. The German defense minister compared Vladimir Putin to Adolf Hitler. Okay, at the same time he's doing this while Scholz is in China, and whenever he does something against the US, he gets a black eye. He becomes Pirate Scholz. I mean, what in the hell? Too tall order, but that in long term, that has to be the future. Otherwise, it's dead. By the way, last little note on this. I enjoy that this is beginning to appear. 2 headlines, one from the Financial Times. The EU faces decline without market reform, blah, 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 blah. We must integrate or face losing to US and China. US and China are beginning to be paired. And the second was Mario Draghi, like a central banker, not really a politician, but a finance guy, to Euractiv. He made this article saying the EU must enact radical change as US and China refuse to play by the rules. That's both of them. Like maybe 2 years and a couple of months late, but holy shit, did we get taken for a ride just like Ukraine? It's beginning to, it's a very slow bureaucracy here, but it's beginning to dawn on them, the depth of their mistake, I hope. I don't know if this...
What did Victoria Nuland say? Fuck the EU. Like, no.
And that is
Well, I think if you act like a vassal, eventually everyone will just treat you like a vassal on both sides of the aisle. So I don't think they're going. So I don't think China is going to encourage Europe to be independent. I think they're just going to be like, well, you come to our, they do their Oliver Twist act going to China. Please, sir, can I have some more in China? Please, sure. You can put more you can invest in our economy more. Sure. But they're just
Yeah, true. I mean, he's coming here. The first place, it's going to be a disappointment, but he's going to Paris. That's what Macron is talking about. I mean, he's quoted as saying, I asked him for help with this ceasefire thing. Then he's coming to Hungary. Then he's going to Serbia. And I think that's interesting. No Germany, no fucking England. I don't know. I'm looking forward to it.
Who's traveling? This is Xi or Macron?
This is Xi Jinping.
So Hungary and Serbia. That's great.
Yeah,
I think it'll be. Paris. I think China will be more generous than the U.S.
For sure.
Certainly. I mean,
Ian doesn't agree.
I wouldn't call it generous. I would just say China looks out for China's interests, which isn't a bad thing. I wouldn't call it generous, though.
Without trampling on others' interests.
Without trampling on them, yes. I mean, they won't. I mean, they won't do the Kissinger act of to be enemies. America's enemy is dangerous, but to be our ally is fatal.
The way that the collective West has treated China, like they would be well within their rights to inflict maximum economic pain on the entirety of the West. But they're not going to do that. That's not their way of behaving. So they're going to be magnanimous, and they're going to say, okay, well, yeah, if like trade is trade, and if you guys want to keep with your bullshit political attacks, like we're going to deal with that. It's not going to hurt us, and yeah, we'll keep trading. But they're dismayed, and they're like put off. Like why is the West dealing in this? What do they call it? Like a zero-sum game, where why can't we all be winners? Why are you guys thinking this block mentality? Is what
did Ian say? The Blinken quote: "You're either at the table or you're on the menu."
You're on the menu, yes. Well, I think I do think it's true that giving up Russia for China was an insane thing to do, because I don't think China will give Western Europeans, particularly Germany, the respect Russians would give them, because Russians really saw them as, Russians up until like within the last 2 years, we're very excited about the pan-European
during Merkel,
partnership idea. Very excited. And, your Western Europe just throw it in their face. I think you can only throw something in people's faces so many times where they get fed up. I don't think Russia is going to extend that hand again, even if Europe asks for it, and they're just going to get not as good as a deal, and it's really, I think they're past the point of no return. It's the European Union at this point. I think both China and Russia are trying to not burn bridges with the USA, because the USA is at this point still too important. But everybody's kind of like, the European Union can't be trusted. They will just bite the hand that feeds them over and over again. There's no point, and it'll just sink into economic irrelevance. I think that's what's going to happen.
In the meanwhile, dreaming of rearming, doing an Iron Dome in Europe, that's very technically possible for them, of course. While, and I love this piece of news, the US and the UK basically banned some Russian metals, I think nickel, aluminum, maybe copper, I don't know. And I looked at the import numbers. The US didn't import any. It was just London. It was like screwing London, and this gets a little bit into the energy wars we all know about Nord Stream. But, Jeffrey Pyatt, the other guy on the Victoria Nuland phone call.
Side up.
Yeah, he's been very loud about destroying or sanctioning or making sure it doesn't happen, the Russians' Arctic LNG projects, because, and this is a couple of weeks old, I think it was in Bloomberg, half of the LNG exports of Russia still come to Europe. After that, the second is China with 21%. And no, we just can't stand that. It should be very expensive, very dirty LNG, but it's still on, guys. And Nord Stream wasn't enough. You have to smother Europe. It looks like the current, American.
This might be a good time to pivot to Ukraine news, unless there's further things to add about the Middle East or Iran.
Let me pivot you to Ukraine news with this short bit of American hypocrisy. I think you'll like it.
If the U.S. can and allies can help shoot down Iranian drones over Israel, why can't they do the same over Ukraine?
Yeah, I knew this question was coming too. Look, different conflicts.
Have you seen this?
Different conflicts, different airspace, different threat picture. And the president has been clear since the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine. The United States is not going to be involved in that conflict in a combat role, and we haven't. We have been providing Ukraine the tools that they need to help defend their airspace. And unfortunately, we can't do that right now because we don't have that national security supplemental funding that they so desperately need.
Yeah, he had to finish on the national security supplemental, but good pivot. Ian, take it away.
Well, so there's a couple interesting things happening in Ukraine this week. There was, of course, the ongoing saga with Russell Bentley, who's still missing, and there's
Texas.
Yeah, yes, and there are still actually there's some fakes. There's several different competing Ukrainian fakes spreading.
That's what I thought when I saw them tell it.
Channels. So there's not really. I'm not even going to repeat them. It's just speculating on, he was killed or that it was the Russians that kidnapped him. As far as I can tell, and there's several of them spreading on social media. But I have contacted someone who knows both him and his wife, Ludmila. So as of right now, I would say, don't take any rumors seriously until it's actually confirmed what did or didn't happen. Right now, it's just he's still at this point. He was just missing, and he was taken by somebody. Is the only confirmed news we have at this point about it. There's several. I would say if you see more detailed stories on social media at this point, just consider them fakes. I'll say that.
Okay, so I did proliferate one of them because it sounded plausible that Russia was holding him.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
might end up
consider that
doing
a
a mea
fake.
culpa if that turns out to be not true, but we'll definitely take your word for it. So what other developments in Ukraine?
Well, so there was, and I actually published this one on my most recent post, actually, on Reading Junkie. There was a story by Alex Vershinin, who is a retired Army lieutenant colonel who commentates on Eastern Europe and NATO strategy a lot. And I actually opined on some things he said right at the beginning of the special military operation. But he just, as of last month, he wrote a story saying that's the era of rapid territorial gains in American maneuver warfare might be over. And he's very clearly talking about specifically Ukraine, the failure of the counteroffensive. It was interesting. It was the stuff that I was saying that other people were saying right at the beginning of the SMO 2 years ago. And so it's interesting to finally see kind of a mainstream NATO enthusiast finally repeating and actually giving some of the same examples we did. So I'll share the link with you, but it's very interesting to see a mainstream pro NATO outlet, and it got shared several places. Like Business Insider shared his story, and several other big outlets shared his story. So it was interesting.
And it's just kind of documenting the transition of modern warfare from these bigger offensives due to these technologies like drones. What other technologies?
Basically, the big thing is he's saying is that, which a lot of people are saying, it's not so much about, you don't win through territorial gains. You win through destroying your adversaries' military forces and their ability to regenerate forces, their industrial capability, and their ability to assemble military power. That's how you win a war while preserving your own, which is a paraphrasing of what he said, but that's basically what he said, which is what a lot of us have been saying at the beginning. It's like, it's not a war that's going to be won by storming Kyiv or storming Kharkov or storming Odessa. It's going to be won by destroying Ukraine's military and their
that was the stated
ability
goal,
to assemble. Yes, and so it's very interesting to kind of see the light. Unfortunately, Vershinin is a retired military guy. He doesn't work at the Pentagon, so it's no sign.
So despite his Eastern European name, he is a NATO.
Well, he's an retired American. Yeah, he does have kind of an interesting name,
we'll link to that article that you wrote in the comments here for sure.
Can I say a link to it? Go ahead.
I was going to make the point. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Ben.
In the US, every written piece, there was an exemplary one by J.D. Vance. Like him or hate him, he just delved into the numbers, and they say the Patriots, people, hardware just doesn't add up, and all of them are about impeding defeat. Like, really, this thing is lost. It seems to be an American realization in the past couple of weeks. Oh, by the way, I tried to find a video. It's not worth it. Among cheers, applause, and handshaking, they actually passed the new mobilization law, right? Mm-hmm. Which is everybody's going to fight. Your second car can be taken. And they struck the demobilization part. So even if you've been fighting for, I don't know how many months, you're not going to get demobilized. And Maria Zakharova.
2 years, not even months. At this point, it's years. This guy's
sorry,
been there since.
That was the provision. Yeah. Well, they deleted it, and Maria Zakharova already reacted, saying, "Yeah, you're finishing off the last Ukrainians," and I can't see that she's wrong.
I was going to make the point that the Western Europe, they signed up for this aggression against Russia, and they were sold this war against Russia with the idea that Russia's going to collapse, the ruble will be rubble, and then guess what? We're going to divide the Russian spoils. And we're going to, all these Western European industries are going to get a foothold, going to get a piece of the pie in Russia. And, they never really considered plan B. They never really thought about, well, shit, what happens if we don't succeed?
They didn't sign up for this, did they?
Yeah, they were filled with hubris. They didn't count on the incompetence and the ultimate competence of, Russia and their allies being able to, win, and win decisively, which is what's going on. And now, of course, they're scrambling to try and figure out Plan B ad hoc. But this just shows that, as they look for ways to, forestall their inevitable decline, they're only increasing the speed at which that decline takes place. That seems to be exactly what's taking place on all these different fronts.
So God bless them trying to get the Philippines, Japan, and South Korea to get into something with China. That would be the absolute last.
Well, there was some interesting headlines from your headline summary going into this show about Marcos kind of, being a little bit reticent to hand over, more military bases to the United States. I know he's done a lot already. Like, he's really just been all in. But that was the first headline I see where he's drawn some lines that, no, we're not going to do that for the U.S. So, I mean, who knows what's going on there? And I was, on Twitter, I was calling for Duterte to initiate a coup, take control of the country, and keep it from sacrificing itself like Ukraine is. I mean, that's what needs to happen. That would be in the best interest of the Philippine nation and the Filipino people, would be for, a sensible, rational leader like Duterte, who has support, to take control of that government and to keep Marcos from, sacrificing all the people in a fucking war against China that's going to be, suicidal. The same thing should happen in Japan with Kishida. But maybe Marcos senses that, he's, at risk of that happening. And so he's pulling back a little bit from his being totally all in with the West.
Yeah, he also made a statement that this is just supposed to settle the sea disputes, but it shouldn't affect trade with China. We can still trade. It's like this pulling back slightly. I can see Carlo having a good time about, Duterte being a rational person, but that's not the point. The point is he would be good for the Philippines. Orban is better for Hungary than some sort of EU liberal would be, even though I don't like the guy, but I saw you chuckle.
Duterte is a tyrant of the first order, but
he
not
would be
for the people of the Philippines in his own right. But
right now he would be a better option.
Perhaps I agree, because potentially anyway.
Yeah.
Who's the guy in El Salvador? Is it El Salvador that he's locking up all the criminals and gangsters? Yeah. So, I mean, Bukele is following the Duterte policy. I mean, that's what Duterte did. And Duterte was relatively even-handed with his relationship with China and the United States. He didn't play favorites, whereas Marcos is just all in with the U.S. So for that reason, Duterte is eminently more preferable.
Except he has the same Achilles heel as Mr. Milei, which is Zion.
Duterte has begun due process trials, and he's released 7,000 of those prisoners. He of the 64,000 he arrested. So, but there is certainly there is a valid comparison between what Bukele did and what Duterte did, except that Duterte more or less focused on political enemies, whereas Bukele focused on the criminal gangs. So that's a kind of a difference there of some substance.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I'm not sure that's true, but I mean, yeah, everything I heard was he was going after the criminals, the drug dealers, with judicial punishment, with extrajudicial executions, summer executions, and I didn't hear anything about political opponents. I don't believe that actually at all, because
they're actually buried in the substance of.
Well, how did he lose the election then if he got rid of all his political opponents?
What's that?
I don't know.
Well, look who got elected. I mean, Marcos got elected. Oh my God, you guys weren't alive when the elder Ferdinand was in power. You want to talk about
what do you mean? I wasn't alive. You know how old I am?
I wasn't, but I know of his wife, Miss Million Shoes.
Right.
Carlo, I do want to give you an opportunity to go to your appointment.
Yeah, I got to go.
and that'll give me the opportunity to get the last word once you're gone. So I'm going to win this argument.
Oh yeah, well, okay,
I want to say
good.
what I
Can you-
like.
Can you take me down? Off.
Yeah, let me take you down, Carlos. So no,
Okay.
thanks for joining us. We will see you next week. Go get to your appointment. Let me see.
Okay.
Remove.
Take care,
Right.
Carlo.
Um.
Now, I was going to say that just like in
Yeah.
Georgia, I like this struggle of, I saw this, it's not available, but some guy talking about, we're not going to be Russian slaves. And he, is raging against a law that identifies foreign funding. It's like, yeah, are you for Georgia or are you for, for basically
Yeah, no,
Brussels money?
that's good news, right? So in Georgia, they're trying to get rid of these NGOs that just really, and they're called NGOs. So these non-governmental Western organizations that are designed to install governments, to manipulate public opinion and install governments that'll pursue, Western interests. So there, a lot of countries have enacted these laws kicking these NGOs out, and they're called NGOs, but that's a misnomer, because they're government-funded organizations. They're not non-governmental organizations. They're governmental organizations working for the United States and pushing U.S. interests onto these sovereign countries. So your country kicked them out, right? Russia has kicked them out. China has kicked them out.
Belarus is the main one.
Belarus kicked them out. If we had a clip of the president of Belarus, talking about kicking them out, that was a great clip. But Georgia was passing a law to kick them out, and some of these pro-Western politicians were very angry. And so one of them went up in Parliament and punched in the face the speaker who was trying to preside over bringing this legislation to the floor where they would have kicked these NGOs out. So, these Western puppets are going ballistic at the thought of these propaganda app networks having to leave. You ready?
I only found a long one, which is 50 seconds. But yeah, maybe we can do 50 seconds because
Why not? Let's go for it.
He's my spirit animal. Yeah, let's go. Fortunately, it's not dubbed.
Отвечаю на твой вопрос, не трудись. Выражем всех мерзавцев, которых вы финансировали.
Massacre.
Ах, вы озаботились, что мы уничтожили ваши структурки. НКО, НПО и прочее, которые вы финансировали. Мы, людей, которые работали на Беларусь, которые помогали людям, пальцем не тронули, а те, которые пользовались вашей помощью, получая от вас финансирование и громили здесь, ваши, которых вы видели здесь в Минске, мы, если мы кого-то не ликвидировали, то мы их ликвидируем в ближайшее. И меня избирает белорусский народ. Поэтому мне важно, как меня воспринимают мой народ.
I mean, this was the conversation where "Oh, you're upset" became a meme, which was so well placed by Lukashenko. Old man Lukashenko.
Yeah, I mean, he said it all there. 270 organizations, all dedicated to regime change and manipulating public opinion to be compatible with Western interests. What are Western interests? Western interests are in opposition to the interests of the working class majority of that country and every country that they act in. So it's their interests are exploitative and to disenfranchise people.
Create a little comprador class and let everybody else kind of
be exploited.
Live in poverty. Yeah.
So the access to the empire, they're on to the game. They know how the game is played, and the people need to wake up and understand as clearly as Lukashenko does how this game is played. And Georgia is figuring it out. There's a lot of people in Georgia that have Western sympathies and that are pro-West and that want the NGOs to come in and drag them to the West. But fortunately, there's some sane voices in Georgia too that understand their position. Sorry, Ian. So Spaz is probably spazzing by my loudness.
No, it was a good soapbox moment. But in Georgia, there are also Soviet-minded, Soviet-sold people.
Yes. Yes,
hopefully in large enough numbers.
One of the best products Georgia ever created.
He's from Gori, Georgia. Yep.
So what about this neo-Marxist psyop?
I don't know which variety the commenter Lilia meant, I don't know, because there's quite a few of them going around.
But I can
mean-
definitely do my best. I don't know if Lilia is still watching, but so I mean, essentially, there's what passes for Marxism, right? What Donald Trump calls the Marxists, what right wingers and conservatives call Marxists. I don't think has anything to do with actual Marxism, and so it's kind of a neo-Marxism, and it's something that has been developed for we can trace it back to now that Carlo's gone to the the schools of critical thinking, the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory and the French School of Critical Theory, where a compatible Marxism was developed that was not in direct opposition to imperialism, and so this compatible left has captured a large part of what passes for the left in the West. And it really has very, very little to do with authentic actual Marxism or resistance to imperialism or revolution or actually existing socialism. And, it focuses on cultural issues. It focuses on transgenderism, wokeism. And this kind of a fake neo-Marxism really isn't, again, what Marxism is actually about. And so I don't know. That doesn't really
Can I add my 10 cents? I don't want to disparage organizations that some of our guests are a member of, so I won't say. But there is one organization we can all despise, the KKE, the Greek Communist Party, and they do heroic things. They stop NATO trains going to Ukraine for some reason. I don't think that's sort of rubber stamped by the leadership, because that in 2022 March they had this communique about this supposed inter-imperial war between Russia and Ukraine, which is insane. And just this weekend, they have this new briefing about an inter-imperial war between Israel and Iran. These people are not worth 5 fucking minutes of your time. They are just as silly and usable as the anarcho, add whatever you want. What is Chomsky calling us? Anarcho-syndicalist. Chomsky twice already urged people to vote for Biden, because that's going to be good for the world. That's just... Call that
so it results in an analysis, again, that's compatible with imperialism and doesn't threaten the status quo. And so, Marxism, genuine Marxism, is a threat to the status quo. It's a threat to imperialism, and it by virtue of it, embracing truth and material reality, historic reality, and how can we change this system and improve the system. And the what results from the neo-Marxism is confusion. It's a pox on both your houses. Both sides are bad, but I don't know what we're gonna do. We just don't like Russia. We don't like China. They're imperialists, but we don't like the U.S. They're imperialists. What are we gonna do? It's worthless. It's absolutely worthless, and it doesn't lend itself to improving the situation at all. But yeah, I mean, more should be said, and I mean that's a big, huge topic that I wasn't.
I have more to say.
Go ahead.
I have more to say. Sorry, we're kind of liberated from Carlo, who's kind of touchy about the new school.
Rude.
I'm sorry, but the crucial difference to me, it looks like, is a victory. Basically, our side, the Marxist-Leninist tradition, we won in the Soviet Union, creating an industrial nuclear superpower from a backwards peasant society. Okay, we won in Cuba, we won in China. Okay, these guys, they celebrate loss. Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht, the founder of the Communist Party of Germany, they were both killed. They really loved Nestor Makhno, a Ukrainian anarchist idiot who was killed. Okay, they liked the Spanish Civil War, of the anarchist side of things. They celebrated Chaz. How long was that? The whatever Capitol Hill fucking thing. It was there for a month. That was their great achievement. Whereas, our school of thought turned around entire, huge, massive nations. And what was the Soviet Union in the time of that asshole who wrote, hello, Carlo, he's still here in the comments. Or maybe that's Rosalie. We'll check it out. But at the time, who was the snitch? Come on. George Orwell's time, that was the Soviet Union. Today, that is China, okay? Anybody who says, look at those horrible fucking the CPC. Oh, sorry, they say CCP bastards want to enslave the world. they're the exact same, and call themselves left and maybe wear something red and you know, put a hammer and sickle somewhere, they're using it. You're being just as usable pawns, exactly like the NGO socialists here in Hungary, who just want nice, comfortable jobs with the money coming from Brussels while pretty much enslaving the nation. That's what I had to say. This is my element. Sorry.
I'd say the big thing is with the pseudo left, is it's really about that, because, you know, even Orwell himself, who's controversial, but he said, you know, there's always a lesser of two evils, right? You know, even in like this, he was talking specifically about the Spanish Civil War, which, you know, the Republican coalition was not particularly ideal, but it was definitely better than Franco's fascists.
Yeah,
for sure, right? And
Tito made his name there, by the way.
Right, but you know, with this kind of pseudo left we have now, they love what they call critical support. They say, oh well, both sides are shit. You know, Iran is an empire, Israel is an empire, Russia is an empire, China is an empire. So that just means we can support NATO and not be ashamed of it, because, you know, those other guys are terrible.
So
too.
it's the
what they do.
Left. It's compatible for sure.
I love that. This is from Caleb Morpin from the Center for CPI. And he calls it kindergarten communism. And you look at something and saying, that's not communist, that's reactionary. And, you know, they look at Maoist guerrilla groups somewhere, the ultimate laughers, and say, that's communist because they have red flags. And they look at Iran saying, that's not communist. It's true, it's not communist, but it is fighting against the hegemony of the US, which is objectively good for everybody in that region. It's restoring the people in the markets who the people have forgotten about for 100 years, you know, the actual people in the region. Not these fucking King Abdullah II and these inserted fucking slaves. That's what Iran is doing, and that's what you should look at. Not, is this socialist, this kindergarten stupidity.
And, you know, Ramin Mazahari wrote a great article called Iran, the Other Socialist Success Story. So there's an argument to make that, you know, Iran is socialism with, you know, Islamic characteristics or Iranian characteristics. Because the system, you know, and it's similar to Russia. Russia's system is not that different from China's system. True. You know, how they organize things. They do central planning. You know, a lot of state-owned industries. Mm-hmm. So, you know, these are necessary aspects. So, I mean, you know, it's a big topic, but, you know, the way that liberals look at capitalism and communism is silly, because, you know, even the United States has aspects of socialism. Like we have state-owned industries, we have a certain amount of planning, we have infrastructure, you know, and so
the military has some aspects.
The military, you know, police, fire, but so there's no such thing as a completely capitalist society, because it wouldn't work, and there's no such thing as a completely socialist that has no, you know, private ownership of the means of production, because, you know, given the reality, the material conditions simply don't exist that, you know, immediately abolishing private ownership of the means of production is not going to be beneficial. Because guess what? It's a capitalist dominated world where most of the wealth is in private hands. So if, for instance, China would immediately abolish private ownership, they would have lost out on trillions and trillions of dollars in direct investment from private Western capitalists who wanted to make a profit. So, you know, so socialism is not just an end goal. Socialism is a journey. So you're on a journey to socialism. That can be considered socialism too. And the journey might not look like end-stage socialism, but you can still classify it as socialism because it is going in that direction with that direct stated intent. And it's, you know, it's a government of, for, and by the people that's really interested in promoting the political and economic interests of the people, as opposed of the working class, as opposed to the political and economic interests of the rich. And that's what distinguishes Western imperialism from China, from Russia. You know, those are governments that are genuinely interested in the well-being of the masses, whereas the West is genuinely interested in the well-being of the wealthy elites. It's an oligarchy. So, all
right,
we're not doing these topics justice. Each one of these deserves, you know,
a full
an
episode
program in and of itself. But so I would say with Carlo, since he's not here, I'm going to win, and it's great. But no, I mean, so he's giving us reports. Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera is from Qatar. Qatar is governed, it's state media, Qatari state media, and it's governed by, a what are those people called? It's a vassal. They're a vassal of Western imperialism. They're put in power by the West. It's a despotic government that is a comprador government. It's a comprador government. So I mean, they're pretty good when it comes to Palestine. But to me, I see these articles accusing Duterte of attacking his political opponents, no different as any leftist leader or any leader that sides with China against the United States. The Western media is going to attack him and accuse him of things. And so I see the accusations. I just don't believe the accusations. And I don't think there's been any kind of evidence behind the accusations.
It's done a great deal of damage, Al Jazeera has, because of the Qatari ownership to the 1.9 billion. That's the ummah of the Muslims in the world, to the Arab youth. They put this picture in their heads, the Western, Mercedes lifestyle, all of that. That's being undone right now, all that damage, But, they said the same about our, what do you call this? The Sovereignty Protection Bureau, the West, the NGO socialists from Brussels, they call it Orban limiting his opponents or eliminating the opposition. That's what they call it. It's just, if you're foreign funded, you can't be an office or you can't be a media organization or face penalties. That's all it is. But they call this a consolidation of power and the elimination of opponents. I mean, just think for a second what these things are in practice. Just look into it would be my advice. The second thing, you already mentioned, Billy Bob. I love these topics. I'm sorry, I don't know how much time you have or how big the bladder capacity.
I've got another couple hours.
So I just want to say another thing that socialism is not is, do you remember AOC wearing that dress to some gala with the tax the rich thing?
Yes.
That made my stomach turn. Because
that's called virtue signaling to an ignorant fake left. That's all that is. It's
I mean, she's way outside even what is the modernly considered American leftism, way outside of it. Like, she's basically plastic liberal, but just exactly the same as anybody in the Democratic Party. But what it isn't just it's not a redistribution of wealth. It never was. I mean, but people made different amounts of money in China, in the People's Republic of Hungary, in the Soviet Union. But what it is building. I mean, China inherited this from Russia, which is the reason they are this mega structure, which I think dwarfs, in real terms, the GDP of the USA, dwarfs, especially in industry, is they learned from the Soviets that you have to have rough, hard industrial base that you can build, the secondary, the third industries. You have to have that all there. China learned this. That's the reason it is where it is. And what you have is going from the steam engine through the diesel engine to the fucking highest speed rail in the bloody world, and the available EVs that pretty much anybody, home ownership is the highest in China, and also disposable income. There's a reason European firms that still make shit which is uncompetitive don't want to lose the Chinese market. That's the place where people still have money. You're still going. Richard Wolff. I owe him something like 5 years ago during my process of political.
Okay.
I do, but he's become, what is it called? The co-op man. He had this short video, and it was absolutely cringe of what will happen in a socialist society if you want to buy a PS4. Did you see this? And you would have to talk to your co-workers about the votes and benefits and all that. It's ridiculous. You'd fucking order it, and it would be there. So that's just not.
So he pushes the socialism is just democracy in the workplace.
Pencil
He
factory.
doesn't talk about overthrowing our oligarchy. All he talks about is, democracy in the workplace. And he tries to sell people on the idea of socialism and that, hey, you guys like to vote for politicians. Well, how come we can't just extend that to our workplaces? And, capitalism says they're about freedom, but when you go to your workplace, so they're not. It's decent criticisms. And I mean, in a very narrow extent, it's true, but he just, he despises, or he's been very critical of actually existing socialism, the Soviet Union, and his whole thing about socialism is just democracy in the workplace. I think is too narrow, and so
according to him, the kibbutzim are basically the models of socialism. Were the models of socialism. That's how they were marketed in the West.
Mondragon is his big, his showpiece. But
not Huawei, the largest worker-owned co-op in the world.
and he's been
but
very
Monzo.
critical of China. He's very critical of China. I think he's been warming up to China, actually. I mean, I've watched him, and he's a good, he's articulate, he's smart, he's a professor, and he's used to just talking about these things, and he has a real good grasp of them. But I do criticize his approach, and I'm going to have an article out very soon on this issue. But we'll talk about that later. So. A minute 34. I don't know. I mean, that's ideology. We don't get a lot into ideology. We kind of focus on current events and things that are happening. But I think we ought to have a place for ideology because it's very interesting. It's very important, and I'm definitely passionate about getting the ideology correct and what is wrong with all the ideologies that are proliferated and allowed within the mainstream echo chamber. And you notice some ideologies are not allowed. And so, libertarianism, hey, that's great. Even anarchism, that's cool. But Marxist-Leninism, you're going to support, Mao and Stalin. Well, that's beyond the pale. You are not going to be allowed any kind of a platform. And why? Because that's the real threat. And that's what China has accomplished, using Marxism-Leninism. That's what the Soviet Union was able to accomplish. And like you said, it's all the success, all the victories for the actual people and against imperialism have been Marxist-Leninist projects. And so there's something to learn about that.
Yeah, going from basically manual farming through mechanized farming to a space fucking program and nuclear power. That's the story of the Soviet Union replicated later in China, the two unprecedented economic expansions in history. Nothing compares to these two. China, the last 20 years, Soviet Union basically 1920 to 1940, and uninterrupted after the most devastating war. It's never happens like that.
And, the difference again is the planning, it's the dedication to planning for the best interest of the society, of the masses of people. And so China has experimented and been tremendously successful with its economic planning, with its balancing of privately owned industry with publicly owned industry and development and infrastructure development. I mean, they've created from scratch over 400 cities that didn't exist. They built from scratch 400 cities. 20 of those cities have more than 1 million people in them. It's been a tremendous success, something that you can't even conceive of in the West, because the West says the government's the problem. Government needs to stay out of the economy. Government involvement is bad. The private sector needs to do it. And that's just stupid. And it's such a limitation on what is possible and how people can benefit, and have their lives improved. So China is showing the world how to succeed in that. They can show Africa. They can show Central and South America. And the U.S. is terrified from that. The U.S. demands chaos, anarchy of the marketplace, and domination by the wealthy interests. And that's what they're fighting to maintain against the forces of rationality, development. And that's what else? Oh, we need to go. My blood sugar is super low, as you can tell. So we will reconvene Friday. We'll probably have a guest along with our regular panel members, but so thank you very much for watching, and we will see you then. Bye, guys.